wholeheartedly in the principle of having two of those every year, one in the spring and one in the fall, because those are just springboards, and they're just repeated opportunities that we have to invite people. And we have families, we have individuals that are here on a regular basis because of an initial invitation from somebody that they are kin to, work with, neighbors with, or something along those lines. And so that's just a really great opportunity for us to engage in that activity. I'm in John chapter 15 tonight, and I wanted to just talk about an aspect of following Jesus and John 15 is one of the more lengthy discourses that Jesus gave. And a discourse is simply just a teaching that is really not interrupted by anything. It's not a question and answer period like he had with, for instance, Nicodemus or someone like that, but just a constant teaching that goes on for quite a while. And he begins the chapter by talking about the fact that he is the vine, the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He talks about the branches a little bit later on, how he expects the branches to bear fruit, and if they don't bear fruit, then they get pruned back, if you will. And so that's a really difficult part of hearing this discourse, to realize that sometimes Jesus puts us in a position to be more effective in bearing fruit, and sometimes whatever that includes may not be all that pleasant. But it is also a test, because as I understand it, I'm not a gardener or anything like that, but I understand that there is a part of the life process of a tree that they grow and they bear fruit for a little bit, and they get to a point beyond the fruit bearing years or age. And in order for that to be re-enhanced, that tree needs to be pruned back just a little bit in order for the nutritions from the ground to get through and cause it to bear fruit again. Later on, he talks about, in verse 9, he says, "As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love. If you obey my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have obeyed my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that he would lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command." And so here's Jesus, and he's speaking this great discourse, and some things obviously that the recipients of this teaching probably didn't take really well across the board. There were probably some that were like, "Yeah, this is good stuff. I enjoy hearing this from Jesus," and all those things. But there would probably be some in the crowd that would say, "Wow, you're implying that I'm not a child of God because I haven't done what I'm supposed to do," or anything like that. And so he goes on to say in verse 15, though, he says, "I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know what his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I learned from my Father I have made known to you." And so Jesus is really just saying, I'm trying to be as real, not trying, he was being as real as he knew how to be in his ability to convey it to his followers. He was simply saying, there are some parts about my ministry that this is really the crux of it, is the fact that not only is the love of my Father being seen through me, but I'm passing it on to you. And it is a great commandment to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, but also to love your neighbor as yourself. And so he says those commands are at the top of the list as far as you're following me. If you want to be my followers, if you want to be my servants, if you want to be my friends, then do what I tell you to do. But there's a catch. Look at verse 18. If the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. If you belong to the world, it will love you as its own. There are times when, if you and I wanted to set aside our Christian principles, our Christian conviction, and didn't have any allegiance to Jesus and his teaching, our life would probably look a lot different. Just in our morals, in the way we treat people, in the way we look at the world, would be a whole lot different. We would probably do things probably of an immoral nature if we didn't have any allegiance to God or his son Jesus Christ. We wouldn't have any problem doing those immoral things, those unjust things, those sinful things. But the truth of the matter is, he's basically saying, this is what happens to me. And so if you're my disciples, you can pretty much take it to the bank that this is going to happen to you as well. It is true that regardless of where it comes from, Christians are going to experience the negatives of being a Christian. You might say, wow, I didn't know there were any negatives. Have you ever suffered for doing what is right? Have you ever been the victim of somebody else's immoral behavior? Has that ever happened? Excuse me. Has that ever happened to you? Yeah, it's happened to every single one of us. And so when we look at that, we say, well, maybe I need to throw this thing out the window and not be a Christian anymore, and I can treat that other person as bad as they treated me. He says, that's not who we are. He goes on to say, as it is, you did not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. That is why the world hates you. Remember the words I spoke to you. No servant is greater than his master. In other words, if you have seen Jesus suffer for who he is, don't think that if he is your master that you're going to escape that same type of treatment from the world. He goes on to say, if they persecuted me, they will persecute you also. If they obey my teaching, they will obey yours also. In other words, as he's speaking this to his followers, he's saying, whatever you teach them, they're going to respond to you the same way that they responded to me, with the same teaching that you're taking from me and you give to other people. If you will, back to the book of 1 Peter. 1 Peter chapter 2. And beginning with verse 19. It says, for it is commendable if a man bears up under the pain of unjust suffering, because he is conscious of God. But how is it to your credit if you receive a beating for doing wrong and endure it? In other words, if you had it coming, it's no big deal. You deserved it. You got it coming. It's not to your credit because you're just having to suffer the consequences for your actions. He goes on to say, verse 21, to this you were called, because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. He committed no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth. When they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. God is the judge. God will act in a just manner. So if we get ourselves, or if we get into a situation to where we suffer just because of our faith in God, because of the fact that we follow Jesus, rest assured that that does not go unnoticed by God. And as the saying goes, God's got your back. He may not have it right now, but eventually he will bring about justice for what you suffered. And so this evening, as you go out into the world, every single one of us will experience different treatment from the world just because of who we are. If we bear up under it, then God will be there with us to bear us through those situations. This evening, if you're not a Christian, we have that promise in Christ. And if you need to be in him this evening, we would love to hold off from going home and rejoice with you in that new birth. If you are in need of the prayers and the encouragement of this church for any reason, we invite you to come as together we stand and sing.